Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for participating in Breakout Room number one. Judging from, we were actually able to keep track in live fashion of what the note takers in your room were jotting down as you were saying it. So we were trying to monitor this. There was a small group of us that included Phil from NOAA, Alexis Mergenoff, my colleague at NYU, and we had Deputy Rory and Caron Owens from OEM in a separate breakout room monitoring what you all were saying. So I'm going to now try to very quickly summarize some of the high points of what I saw. And I want to actually, before I highlight what you said, among the things that we were talking about in terms of what will the formal response be or what could it be, there will be an emergency operations center that the city of Boston will obviously set up to handle this event, and that emergency management center, emergency operations center, will be coordinating with other emergency operating centers like the states, and if there's going to be a regional one, if this is a large enough storm, which this is likely to be. And in the local emergency operations center, there will be a liaison from the Office of Neighborhood Services that will probably be working to coordinate information from the communities to pass through to the formal emergency response entities that sit around the table of the Emergency Operations Center. Another thing that we talked about in terms of the formal response was going to be the critical importance of radios. Obviously, one of the challenges that I've presented to you is that communications are down for the most part, very limited. But one thing that is not down is radios. So if you had a transistor radio, you had batteries, you'd be able to hear some of the local information, and it would be a trusted source. After Hurricane Michael or Maria, I can't remember which one, in 2017 in the Virgin Islands, the governor of the US Virgin Islands made a habit of every night at 6 p.m. going on the radio and doing a situational report and update. And it was a very helpful, useful thing for the community. So here's what you all said were some of the answers to your questions. Who's going to be affected most and where are they? So obviously a lot of the groups focused on the elders and on families with kids, particularly small kids. Many of you focused on those who are disabled, particularly those with cognitive or mental disorders. You talked about people in institutional settings like nursing homes and one specific residence, the Wrightville Senior Residence Inn. You talked about people who were hospitalized, people who had language barriers, and people who were poor and homeless, all as being high need communities that are probably going to need immediate assistance during this phase. Some of you mentioned the fact that there need to be a number of boats available to respond. In our room, Deputy Rory and Caron Owens were mentioning that there will be fleets of boats from the Coast Guard, the Boston Fire Department, the Boston Police Department, and the Massachusetts State Police that would likely be available. And one can imagine that there will be private boats that will be coming in from volunteers. Down south, with some of the recent storms, there were a lot of stories about the Cajun Navy, which is just local boaters coming in to help rescue people, and it's entirely possible that we would see that in East Boston. When we were asking you about how do you prioritize the needs, one person actually mentioned something that had not even occurred to me, which is that the sewers will not be functioning properly. And there could be a lot of backup at sewers. And so that's also going to be an issue of just even getting through the streets. People looked to both BPHC, the Public Health Commission, and to the East Neighborhood Health Center, East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, as trusted entities and being entities that would be trusted also to prioritize. Generally, when we were asking about who is trusted, people said people in uniform, City Hall, community activists and leaders, community organizations acting as information brokers, which I think is going to be really critical and something that I'm going to want you to think about in the next breakout activity. And then the need for face-to-face communications to occur. How to share information. I was grateful to see at least one person said that the network map that we presented before would be a good place to start. And I would agree that one thing to think about is what are the the pathways of communication that happen right now in the community. We're going to be asking you about that essentially in the next breakout. And how can you take what is the strength of the community right now in East Boston and begin to project it on into the response entity. Before I break you up, are there into the next breakout session, are there any questions that anybody wants to put in the chat or comments? I'll at least entertain that for a moment. Um, excuse me. So if anybody has any comments or questions that they want to put in the chat, we could do that for 1 or 2 minutes. If I don't see any in the next moment or so, we're going to go back to the breakout rooms, the same rooms for a shorter period of time. That was already pretty short. Now I'm going to give you all 15 minutes to think about what can community organizations do. There will be a series of questions that your facilitators will pose to you, and we'll see what you come up with next. I am going to, at the end of this, we're going to clean up the notes that are taken from all of these rooms, and we'll put that as part of the resources that we share after the event. So keep in mind, if you haven't registered, don't forget to register for the event at the link that you see. And that way we'll be able to share a report back to you. So at this point, Josh, if you could please put everyone in their breakout rooms again, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.